think one of my issues is that, and certainly one of the issues with my condition is that you fear abandonment, and that's part of the issue when you don't necessarily have that core parent, certainly in my case a father, to kind of guide how you sort of function in society stably. So I was about 20, been in a relationship for a year or two at that point. We'd moved in together, and she was out one night in London, I think, with another guy, and had turned her phone off, and I was going mad. And I didn't have any alcohol, I didn't have any drugs, I didn't have any means of kind of numbing that anxiety and that pain and that adrenaline that I was feeling at the time. And I took a knife and I cut my chest open. And I was bleeding, and I just wanted to feel some kind of release. So I went to the police station in Guildford, and at this point it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, I'd say. And I said, I really need to speak to someone. I'm going to kill myself. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if in my head I would have been able to kill myself. I think I have a want to live, and I have a want and a thirst to do something with my life and proactively actually change the world in some way, or do something that's memorable and warranted, you know, with my energy and with the skills I do have. And they just said to me, the police said to me, there's no one here, don't you have any friends you can go to, can't you call a friend and go over there? And I thought, well, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and when you've got issues mentally, you don't necessarily want to call up your friends or the people that you work with and say, by the way, guys, haven't mentioned anything about this before, but I suffer from some kind of manic depressions or something, and I've just cut my chest open, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm in the centre of town, and I don't know what to do with myself, and I might kill myself. And that's when I went to the doctors and I said, you know, I've thought about killing myself, and to be honest, I don't know what to do about it. And they said to me, try some antidepressants. So I said, all right, and tried the antidepressants. But when you're a sales guy and you can barely string a sentence together by 3 o'clock, it's not conducive to making money, and so you're not going to stay in a job very long. So within a month of starting, so this was around about the age of 20, let's say 2021, within a month of starting the antidepressants, I chucked them in a bin and said, sod this, it's a mental issue, I've got to deal with it. And I went to a doctor at the Royal Surrey County Hospital, and they sat with me for sort of 4 or 5 hours. And in the end, he said, you know, Thomas, we strongly feel that you're on the bipolar spectrum. And I just felt kind of useless, really, you know. And the doctor put me on a waiting list. That waiting list lasted 3 years, during the course of which I went to see another doctor at a hospital who re-diagnosed me with the same issues as the first doctor. So I did kind of have a good indicator as to what I was dealing with, but at this point I was thinking, I've been through kind of 3 to 4 years of doctors and hospitals not really giving a shit, to be honest. It's a wonder half the people with mental health issues are still alive, based on my experience with how the mental health service was at that time, to be honest. I mean, I've stood on fucking train tracks, you know, waiting for oncoming traffic, not knowing what was wrong with me, before any kind of diagnosis or any kind of help from the system that we have in play. There was no mechanism for support. I tried to go and seek counselling, but I think when you see people almost want to vomit by some of the stuff that you've been through, you realise that if they're not as fucked up as you are, they're probably not going to be able to help you. And it became quite apparent after a while that I wasn't going to get my support and my fix from going in that direction. I started thinking, okay, this is an issue that's defined mentally. how can I combat that? You know, if I want to do something about this, I'm going to have to trigger a mental stimulus within me that helps to guide me through that path of destruction that I see on a daily basis. How do I go from being bedridden and lonely and depressed and wanting to kill myself to this, you know, ecstatic kind of high or adrenaline that you get when you have a good day? So I started thinking about how I could change the way that I was feeling during the course of that day. Previously, leaving the house on a bad day was quite dark and difficult. So I'd walk to work a different way. I'd walk through the park. I'd leave slightly earlier to try and do that. I'd create systems in the morning, whether that be a cup of coffee, toast, half an hour of TV or whatever, to get myself in kind of a mental state or a mindset that was productive for whatever day I was going to have. And to be honest, most of the time you just got to fake it until you make it. You know, if you put yourself in a state where you feel like, yeah, I'm getting there, I'm feeling positive, and you start to talk positive and you start to have energy and you're meeting with people and you're trying to drive change or try and change someone else's life, then at the end of the day, you kind of end up living within that world mentally as well. And so over time, I think I've found it a lot easier to deal with that. We all suffer from anxiety as far as I'm concerned. You know, the quicker we bridge the gap between the fact that if you're getting bollocked by your missus because you didn't come home on time from work, or you're running around trying to get the kids ready and you're anxious and you're stressed and you're sweating and you're thinking, God, I've got to get to mum and dad's. We all go through those anxieties every day. And the quicker we bridge the gap between the people who suffer quite heavily and everyone else, who all still suffer from mental anguish fundamentally, because that's what anxiety and stress is, the quicker we bridge the gap and we realise it's just all varying degrees of the same thing, I think the better we're going to be as a society in general, and the more productive we're going to be. If we took every managing director and CEO of an organisation in the UK and we said, you know what, 45% of individuals who suffer from onset mental illness, they suffer from that because of their lifestyle, their working environment. And it stems primarily from that working life. So think about if you as a CEO or an MD made a change within your organisation and everybody did the same thing, regardless of if you're a one-man band all the way up to the blue chips. We could effectively rid the UK of 50% of mental health issues, or certainly control 50% of the mental health issues in the UK. So I think now, that's probably what I'm fighting for.
So that's the morose bit done. I don't really do morose for too long, so I think it's better to encapsulate it in a small snippet. There will be some minor morose later on, but we'll work through it. If I can just move this poignantly. Okay, so I just want to talk about a brief bit of my life. 10 years ago, actually, today, not today, that would be really convenient. It wasn't actually today. But 10 years ago was that point in time where about 5 minutes from here I was stood on a train track above the Wooden pub, and I was waiting for the oncoming traffic. So I was in a very dark place. So to come back to a university I was thrown out of and talk about how successful I am now and how well I've done without any education is fundamentally an ideal for me. I was one of twins, so my twin passed away at birth when we were born, so my mother was put into the paternity ward, whatever it is, after you've had a baby, but my twin was stillbirth and they didn't realise she was pregnant with another child until she went into labour for the second time 3 or 4 hours later, at which point I was called Victoria, which was later changed to Thomas. So the twins point was really to encapsulate that I've always felt like there was a part of me missing in a way, so I've always felt like I wasn't quite the whole puzzle, effectively. Starting the blog, actually, it was about March 2016, and I'm going to try and avoid the light glancing off my bald head. So it's about March 2016, I decided that I was poor, I didn't have any money, my businesses were running, but all the money was going back into the businesses, so I thought, fuck it. it's not going to get any worse, is it? If I've already got no money and that's really all I care about because that's about sustainability and that's about keeping me okay, then who really cares if anyone's going to get upset by me posting some swear words and a bit of blogging online? Now, I thought blogging was for repressed writers who were unsuccessful, which I think it still is, so if you are repressed, get a blog. But through my blog, actually, some of the vice presidents at Unilever actually picked up on the blog and they put me in touch with a chap called Jeff McDonald, who previously heard speak this evening. And my kind of journey really began there. Please note the image on the right, which basically sums up my lifestyle. So I met Jeff. Everything started to kick off at that point because people were seeing my story. I hit 10,000 people in the first week. So when I launched my blog, I thought, got a marketing database of about 50,000 people. I'll just email all of them because it's mental health. So you can't do me for spam, can you? So I did. They can. They reported me. Some people reported me. Who reports mental health as a spam? Anyway, I was reported by spam, but some cool people picked up on it, and I was invited to do Head Talks, which is a video you've just seen in conjunction with the BBC. And through Head Talks, I then got more exposure, and I was invited into the IOD to present there alongside people like Jeff, who were way above my pay grade. And it went very well, actually. And so the IOD launched a Leadership in Mental Health Awareness Awards this year in recognition of some of the stuff that I've done. I like to say in recognition of some of the stuff that I've done because it makes me sound much better. And I won that award this year, so that will be a national award next year. And so 50,000 members of the IOD community will now have a chance to compete for that award, and it'll be a widely spread award across the UK, which is very important for mental health because people are going to be starting to think about it. I'm also doing a video blog and blogging for the IOD now as part of their mental health awareness campaign. So that's very exciting. It's kind of inspiring to actually be part of that because I know that I can really see the return on investment in that change in a sense. So I didn't need to do that. It's weird. I hate people who do that. Here's the last year of my life. Bit of a name drop moment there. So you'll notice I've slipped a few in there. Admiral Akbar over there, which is a poignant one. So yeah, the journey over the last year has been amazing. I've met some of these really exciting people. Dynamo I didn't meet through my mental health journey. I was on a date with my partner and we saw him pull up to some lights. So we harassed him. But where did it all begin? So at 12 years old, around 12 years old, I was followed by a scout for the Youth Olympics team. I also studied various martial arts from an early age. So my father was a martial arts instructor. He was a repressed homosexual and a very aggressive man. But he was a martial arts instructor and I was made to go to martial arts regularly. So my mum took me to swimming because she hated my father, and my dad took me to martial arts because he was aggressive and controlling and I had to do that. However, I'm quite a tasty martial artist now, so it worked out okay. My parents split around 12 or 13-year-old, so I decided to give everything productive up and I became a thesp. And really from then on I had no focus other than to just do acting. I knew that acting, if you were good at it, could make you money, and money was what I wanted because when I was a kid we were poor and we didn't have anything, and my mum put food back on the shelves in Sainsbury's and Waitrose and things like that. I'm not actually in Waitrose when we were poor. But you know how it works, and fundamentally I had this drive in my mind that all I had to do was get money and then I could have kids and then everything would be okay and it was going to be fine. But I got kicked out of drama school because I'm mental. But they didn't know that then, and neither did I. And they kicked me out and they removed my scholarship, and because I was poor, I wasn't able to go back to drama school. So I decided to become a telemarketer, because that's how you make money when you're a thesp, and you failed. And I hit the real world and I started travelling. I've travelled over 15% of the world's countries, and I've travelled half of those countries, including India and Cambodia, on a motorbike. This is the love of my life, Anna, who is casually sitting in the second row. We now have a baby, so that is very, very exciting news. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We can do it again at the end, we'll work on it. So, I run 2 companies, 5 brand channels. I won't bore you all with that. Effectively, the top 2 do clothing, so I do clothing for sports clubs. I'm a preferred supplier for the University of Surrey Sports Park. Anywhere you throw a stick in Surrey, I've got a customer. And on the corporate wardrobe front, I deal with most of the 5-star hotels in central London. Indian Apparel is me working as a consultant to help the Indian economy and transform how they do ethical and sustainable manufacturing. So I work with companies that I know have the right processes in place in India, and I try and pair them with major brands in the UK to generate revenue for the Indian factories and improve on their economy long term. And Canine Crew is a pet product business where we're a family business and we make everything by hand. And we're in 32 countries and it's very, very exciting times. Just got an investor coming on board at the end of the year. So we will be globally the strongest pet product company within the next 3 years. We've already taken over the UK, Europe will take us probably 6 months, and America's the final frontier. So this is the morose bit again. So I'm going to cover these points because I think it's talking about some of these elements of what people have been through in their past that really make people think about what their situation is. And I'm conscious of time, Clive, but I will be highly efficient. I'm saying that so that he's now under pressure to let me go on for as long as is necessary because of this awkward British stiff upper lip angst that we all have within ourselves.
It's just the wine I'm thinking about.
He's thinking about wine, but he's a bit wobbly after that sort of thing, so we'll kind of keep it on the down low. So my earliest memory of my father was actually, I can't put an age on it, but she was around 12 at the time. I think I was around 5. I remember quite clearly standing in the hallway and he was smashing up my sister's room because she hadn't done the washing up properly or hadn't put it in the washing up machine or whatever it was. And she was just there under her covers in tears, and I remember seeing her face, and he was smashing things and stuff like that. At 6 or 7, my father, we got up in the middle of the night, we were taken down to the living room. My father had a Rambo-style combat knife. When I say Rambo-style knife, I mean Rambo, he didn't have shit on my dad, okay? So my dad had every kind of weapon, shotguns, you name it, my dad had it. And he took that combat knife out and started tearing up the house, and he told us he was going to go out and find somebody and kill somebody. So I just remember that I was sitting on the sofa with my dad doing that at, again, sort of 5, 6, 7 years old, and you can imagine sort of the angst and, just the non-understanding in a child's mind to go through that kind of thing. I saw my first stripper at the age of 13. No, not a high five for that one, please, because although it sounds cool, I actually witnessed her having sex with a 40-year-old man. So my father was a biker. He was involved quite heavily with the Hells Angels and a range of bike clubs, and so I was often in the biker clubhouse, let's say, exposed to any kind of drug you can imagine, exposed to strippers and sex and all the sort of things that can possibly go on within a biker's clubhouse, which seemed great at the time as a 13-year-old boy kind of discovering your sexuality, but just really created an issue for me sexually longer term, because I didn't respect women, I didn't really understand how to be emotive with women, etc. And I think I was just exposed to that too young. And now thinking about having a son next year, I'm thinking, Jesus, that's the kind of stuff I went through, but that's not standard, that is weird. And I just don't want him to go through anything like that. I mentioned bananas in the last comment, but she used a number of bananas in a manner that I cannot bring myself to describe, okay? And the reason I put this in is not because I just think it's funny to laugh at these types of things. I think it's really important to realise how fucked up that is. I watched a woman insert bananas into herself and then excrete them into a pint glass only to have someone else eat them. Okay, at 13. I had my first bar fight with the same crowd at 14, so I beat up a fully grown man because I was attacked, or my dad's friends were going at it in this bar fight, and I was 14-year-old and a guy came to attack me, so I beat him up because I didn't really have, there was no one to defend me at that point, there was nothing I could do other than to just defend myself, so I had my first fight. Had my first physical fight with my father at 15. I was drunk again at a biker rally, so they just give out alcohol at these things, apparently. And I'd had vodka on some tokens that I had, and I was drunk, and my father was sitting with a woman, chatting her up. I mentioned he was a repressed homosexual, but it was worse that he kept on cracking on with women and just didn't accept it, because that was what kind of made it sort of an odd and strange relationship for me growing up. But I remember them talking about me being a virgin, and I decided that I didn't care if I was a virgin, or I didn't care about any of the stigma attached to being a virgin, And so I decided to let everybody in the bar know, because I'd had a bit of vodka, that I didn't care about being a virgin, and that was okay because I'm sort of 14, 15 years old at that point, at which point my father attacked me, tried to suppress me, almost broke my arm, and I managed to get away and stand back far enough that I could give him a quick drop kick in the nuts, and then I ran away. So he'd always taught me as well, son, when you're ever in a sort of a defensive situation, someone attacks you or something like that, just put your hands up and say that it's going to be okay, calm down, and then kick him in the nuts. But it came back to haunt him. At 16, my father was locked up for battering a woman. He held a knife to her throat, and she'd been having an affair behind his back, and he smashed up her house and he was taken to prison. So I was supposed to be picked up by my father from school while I was doing my sixth form years. And he didn't come to pick me up. I was picked up by my mum, and I was very aggressive to her because I was upset that my father wasn't coming. And she didn't tell us until we got home 45 minutes away that he had been arrested. And at 18, I had to wade into a fight that my father was having with two men, very heavy under the influence of drugs. And I've put here, imagine a 10-round boxing match lasting 30 minutes with 3-minute rounds and rest breaks. And we fought those men for 45 minutes before police arrived. So you can imagine the level of cocaine that is in the system of a human being, that if you knee them in the head, 20 or 30 times, and I'm not exaggerating there, if you physically try and put someone down and they're still getting up telling you they're going to kill you, that's a very difficult and stressful situation. And I generally felt on that night that I was going to be dead. I thought one of the guys was saying, "I'm going to fucking stab you, fucking kill you," and I genuinely felt that he was. I thought he would get. There was a Chinese takeaway counter that me and my father had jumped over at this point, and that was all that was standing between me and him. And he had a spade at this point. He'd gone out, and I don't know how that even happened. At 20, I wanted to kill myself. Clearly, at 21, my father died. At 22 was when I stood on the train tracks in an effort to take my own life. At 22, I was diagnosed with being on the bipolar spectrum, and they said you've got what's called emotionally unstable personality disorder, which makes it sound like you're going to wake up with a horse's head in your bed. So that was depressing. And then at 24, I made an attempt on my life again. And then by 26, I was living on an island in Cambodia with the indigenous people. So between the ages of 24 and 26 was when I started to contemplate, my father was dead. What was I going to do to kind of get myself past that kind of turmoil, and how was I going to move on with my life and change my mindset and my perception of the world? I didn't want to kill myself, I wanted to do something productive, as I said in the video. I just didn't know what that was. Here's the bipolar spectrum in politically correct form. And here's my bipolar spectrum. So this is where I am generally. This is the hypomania, which I was at just while we were having the speech before mine, where I really just had to wee. I get no impending doom for me. It's just really need to wee, sweat a lot, doesn't smell, so don't worry. I'm just drenched under this. It is high levels of anxiety. Okay, so I range between the hypomanic state here and the extreme levels of depression, where I just don't want to get out of bed. Here's a few who are in the 1 in 4. Now, Vincent van Gogh is my first up. Now, he did some good painting. He's not exactly a poster child for mental health. Okay, so yes, he did cut his ear off. We'll forgive him that for the art, but I've tried to do similar sort of art and it hasn't worked. Mozart is another one I quite like. Russell Brand, I'm a big fan of Russell Brand, and I hated him for a long time because he was a drug-addled, narcissistic arsehole. And then he stopped doing drugs and alcohol, and he became Jesus, I think. I don't know what it is now, but I think that's what you're supposed to call him. Britney Spears is in there. My partner can't condone Britney Spears, but I thought I'd pop her in there anyway. And Bill Oddie is over there as well, which we have to pay homage to. Mel Gibson as well, indiscretions with the Jewish community. But that aside, Mad Max, let's be fair, it was good. Here's what people with bipolar disorder say it feels like. So I just want you to take a moment to snapshot some of those. Here we've got being constantly in activities that take up time and hardly any results or satisfaction. That is like every day in terms of what I'm doing. I feel like I'm sort of wading through emails and nothing really happening. So it's sort of surreal. But I think most people just don't really know how to talk about what their issue is. It's not even a case of whether you're going to be starting to talk to people about the fact that you're feeling down or anxious or whatever. Inside you, you don't know what it is. During drama school, I thought I was gay. I thought maybe something was going on. I just felt still like I was lost and empty. And I thought, well, I better hook up with a guy because otherwise I'm not going to know. And then I might go on for 40 years being like my father. And in fact, I wasn't gay. But everything turned out okay, and I think it was important to kind of go through that. But I didn't have any kind of support mechanism. So the drama school was off-site at that time, so we didn't have Centre for Wellbeing in the same way as it is at the University of Surrey now, which is very successful. And so I was living on my own in just a studio flat, not knowing what was going on in my life, and I think that was the most difficult time for me. The drama school weren't receptive. The director, Peter Barlow, at the time, he wasn't, I don't know if he's still there now, non-PC as well, but, you know, they didn't want to help me. They just saw me as a troubled child who was causing problems and didn't want to listen to teachers, when in fact all I was asking for them to do was to listen, you know, to what my issues were and why I was struggling, and they didn't care. I was assigned a mentor and I was expelled a week later. So I think things have improved a lot now. I work with Rotimi Akinsete, who runs the Centre for Wellbeing over at the University of Surrey, and I think if I was here now, it would be a totally different ballgame, because what they've got for those kids is a totally different level. And that's exciting, and that's why I want to be here tonight, effectively. So why would you hire someone like me? We're creative thinking, we're tenacious, we're high energy, we're adaptable, we can talk to anybody. We lead well, we're target oriented, we're commercially minded, we're caring, understanding and more empathetic than all of you lot anyway. We're trustworthy, and we are. We're loyal, and we've got high IQs, and we're high functioning apparently. So I think the thing is, trustworthy and loyal I sort of highlight on there, because for me, I thought the biggest anxiety for me is if I've let someone down, or if I think that I'm going to upset someone or whatever, and I've always had to have this kind of acceptance from people, you know. And obviously, March last year, I just didn't care about it anymore. It hadn't really worked for me. I cared about a lot of people. A lot of people shit on me. People owe me money around the UK. I've tried to work with other people and it didn't work. So at 20, I set up my own business and I sort of didn't look back. My own business was not very successful. I've got to be totally honest with you. At the age of 21, I was earning £11,000 a month, which is pretty impressive, but I was wasting that on drink and drugs and all these kind of things. And it wasn't really until I met my partner 8 years ago that I started to save money and understand the value of money and these kind of things. So what does define who I am now? So in the last 3 to 4 years, I have generated over £1 million worth of revenue across my 2 businesses, on my own. I've qualified as a rescue diver. I've got a fairly hefty non-disclosure agreement in place at the moment with the BBC, so I can't really talk about this, but I was within the final sort of mix of 18 out of 88,000 for The Apprentice this year, and it's depressing to see what went through the actual process. But you know, they don't want anyone just landsliding it through to the wind, so that's respectable. I was almost bitten by a cobra, which I killed, along with several other villagers on an island in Cambodia. I've had a tiger run across the road in front of our motorbikes while my partner and I were in the middle of India, just riding along, and literally fully grown tiger, not caged or anything, because they don't do that in India apparently. Safety first. Came bounding out of the bushes and ran straight across a few metres in front of my motorbike. Didn't have a GoPro. Very annoying. I bought a nice canvas to commemorate it. Elephant chase. I've been chased by an elephant again with my partner on the back of a motorbike. We were run down by elephants and they chased after us down the road. I've saved 3 people's lives on a rescue diving expedition where the instructor was a moron and lost 3 people around the coast and had to do search patterns to find these people and get them back onto the boat. I've almost capsized on a boat in a storm, which was too top heavy and was bowing backwards and forwards like a pendulum. That was not ideal. But I was edging my way and my partner's way closer to all the life-saving equipment, so I could whip that off, jump off the boat, and we would have been fine. I've stopped an old man from having a heart attack, or certainly rescued the situation while he was having a heart attack, to the point where the NHS took over. I was almost killed by an Arctic lorry when we were nearly crushed on the way to a dog show at 1 o'clock in the morning, which effectively flipped 2 metres in front of our car, which was not ideal, but luckily my partner drives, I don't drive, so we evaded that. I was engaged on the top of the Toub Coal Mountain in Morocco, highest mountain in North Africa. I've built homes on an island in Cambodia. I've lived on an island in Cambodia conserving the coral reef. I've travelled the entire of South India on a motorbike, and over the last year I've hit over 250,000 people with my Bipolar Businessman blog and subsequent articles and writing that I've done for people like Red Letter Days, Standard Life, etc. off the back of that. So this is what I feel like I've achieved. And when I look back on that, I think, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, I've had a good stab at it. All right, and I started late, so I've not done too bad, but there's loads more to do. This is where we got to. So this was at the IOD Director of the Year Awards this evening. I mentioned earlier that they've now launched this as a national award. And the beauty is, as you run a pet product company, this lady here is Claire Horton. She's the CEO of Battersea Dogs Home, who's next to me on my table. Guess in. And this chap founded Ella's Kitchen. So he's one of the wealthiest people in the UK, and he is a very successful businessman. So to be stood amongst people like this is, for me, inspiring in general. And this is also where I am now. Apparently this element here is what signifies that this will be my son. So that is quite exciting. And I thought I'd just put in one final poignant moment of philosophical thought before we close, because I think that is very important. And Clive, this is the moment where you sit back and think, oh, that red wine is ever so close, but those people are going to leave before you.